Hi everyone, my group's presentation is on memory, and specifically we're focused on memory in everyday context. So in this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about memory as it relates to the past and imagining the future, and also false memories and their connection to the primacy and recency effect. So memory, as a lot of you may know, is essential in a lot of parts of everyday life. Two main parts of memory are long-term and working memory. Long-term memory is what it sounds like. It's memories that are more long-term in your head and a little bit deeper than working memory, which is kind of at the front of your mind, and it's information that's held there temporarily, and there is a limitation of how much information you can keep in your working memory. Encoding is the process of bringing information into your memory. Rehearsal is the process of keeping memory in your working memory or bringing it to your long-term memory. And retrieval is the process of bringing memories back more to the front of your mind, and that typically comes from long-term memory. Two other important parts of memory are semantic versus episodic. Semantic memory is general knowledge, not tied to any specific event or anything, whereas episodic, which we're going to talk more about in this presentation, is related to events or experiences. We know a lot about memory and what parts of the brain are important based on fMRI scans and what parts light up during those. I'm going to pass it over to my partner to talk about the first study we have.
So the first paper is by Schachter, Addis, Hassabis, Martin, Spring, and Spooner. And the original inspiration for this paper was an fMRI study, which was coupled with some behavioral studies that showed a significant overlap in activity of certain areas of the brain when participants were asked to remember episodic memories and construct novel future events in their head. Further support for the link between memory and simulating the future came along with a study of amnesic patients. Obviously, amnesic patients have some serious impairments to remembering the past, and this study showed that they also struggled significantly in simulating the future. So the constructive episodic simulation hypothesis is the hypothesis that episodic memory is stored as bits and pieces, and remembering these events is just piecing these parts together and using context clues and common sense. It also poses the idea that simulating the future is just putting these pieces of different memories together in a relevant and novel way. Despite many similarities between how the brain remembers and imagines the future, there are some key differences. One of these differences is demonstrated in a study by Addis, Wong, and Schachter. In this particular study, participants were prompted with a noun and asked to either remember a specific memory or construct a new scenario that would take place in the future relating to this noun. fMRI scans revealed a higher level of activity in almost all relevant brain regions when constructing a new scene versus remembering an old one. One hypothesis as to why this involves the constructive episodic simulation hypothesis. And the theory goes that constructing future events requires the brain to access multiple different episodic memories and use the bits and pieces of these in much more flexible ways than just remembering an event would require. Some more differences between the two are clear in patients with semantic dementia. Patients who have semantic dementia are still able to recall episodic memories, and this study showed that they had a great deal of trouble imagining future events. And the theory is that semantic memory provides a scaffolding for the brain through which it's able to flesh out a more complete simulation using episodic memories and common sense. Despite these differences, there is significant evidence to support a strong link between how the brain remembers episodic memories and how it imagines possible future events.
When we covered methods to study the brain, we discussed how it is useful to combine different techniques. In the study we just covered, fMRIs were used in addition to studying the effects of brain damage to investigate the relationship between memory and imagination. The use of fMRIs in cases with brain injuries or impairments allowed the discovery of differences in memory and imagination by realizing that impairments in imagining the future can exist independent of deficits in past memory. fMRI, or functional magnetic resonance imaging, is a technique used to study brain activity with spatial precision, as well as the ability to tell when brain activity takes place. It works on the basis that hemoglobin is less sensitive to magnetism when transporting an oxygen molecule, which can be used to determine the ratio of oxygenated blood to deoxygenated blood, giving a measurement called the blood oxygenation level dependent signal. When a neural region is active, it draws more oxygen and will thus have a higher ratio of oxygenated blood to deoxygenated blood. Episodic memory is a type of explicit memory for specific events or experiences. The textbook mentions several possible subdivisions for episodic memory. The first, being autobiographical memory, is the memory from one's life as well as what constitutes the self. This was also the type of memory covered in the study we mentioned. Flashbulb memory refers to the memory with longevity and is especially vivid. Events that evoke strong negative emotions are especially prone to the formation of flashbulb memory. Memory for traumatic events can be a specific type of flashbulb memory, but one key distinction is that people can sometimes quickly lose memory of traumatic events. It is proposed that this may be due to the need to create a sense of psychological distance to block the pain from the memory.
Another study on memory was done by researchers at the University of Freiburg in 2019, and it aimed to test the emergence of false memories under various circumstances, including within both long-term and working memory. The researchers hypothesized that the formation of false memories relies on gist memory encryption as opposed to verbatim memory. Gist memories differ from verbatim ones in that they are general interpretations of concepts, while verbatim memories describe specific representations. In addition to these two types of memories, the researchers also examined the two methods by which information can be reviewed after it's initially received. Articulatory rehearsal, which is characterized by verbal repetitions of information, and attentional refreshing, which occurs when someone thinks back to recently learned material, were manipulated in the 4 experiments in order to determine the individual effects of each on false memories. The 4 experiments each consisted of around 50 college students being shown words in a list and then being tested on these words after either a short or longer delay in order to manipulate the contribution of gist and verbatim memories to overall recollection. In addition, during these delays, participants completed various tasks of either low or high attention demand in order to control whether participants were able to use refreshing rehearsal or both in the time between being shown the words and having to recall them. The tasks that participants did were designed to either promote or hinder one or both of the memory mechanisms. And throughout the 4 experiments, it was shown that in general, the availability of refreshing within the trials increased the prevalence of false memories, as shown by there being more recognition of distractor words when refreshing was available versus when it was not. In addition, it also increased the use of gist memory over longer periods of time. On the other hand, it was shown that the availability of rehearsal decreased the amount of false recognition of words and increased the amount of verbatim memorization used. The findings of this research suggest that rehearsal is a direct contributor to verbatim memory as well as to the maintenance of working memory as a whole.
This article could be linked nicely with another experiment mentioned in the lecture. The researchers asked participants to recall words from the word list with 20 words, and immediately asked them to recall as many words they can. The pattern of the words was not required, and the rate of correct recall for each word is recorded. We can see in the graph that at the beginning, the words are stored in the long-term memory and the rate of correct recall is high. This is regarded as the primacy effect. In the middle of the list, the participants are overwhelmed and can hardly recall those words. Words at the end of the list are stored in the working memory so that the correct rate increases due to the recency effect. We can adjust this experiment to the pattern of this article. It can be regarded as an immediate test without refreshing and rehearsal. It's like the part of the experiment too. Or we can regard the primacy effect as the delayed test and the recency effect as the immediate test. We can also expand the experiment in the lecture. For example, we can use refreshing and rehearsal actions to see the change of the graph. From the result of the article, we expect that the refreshing could increase false memory in the long-term memory so that the beginning of the line goes down. The rehearsal reduces false memory in the working memory so that the end of the line increases. Another idea is somehow interesting in the lecture. In the lecture, we know that the working memory transferred to long-term memory through time. We can observe this in the article. The immediate test uses working memory while the delayed test, which is a bit later, uses long-term memory. However, the time barrier is not that clear in the experiment mentioned in the lecture. It is one single test and the working memory is at the beginning is transferred after being overwhelmed. We could expect future studies on how long-term memory is transferred from working memory, such as how much time is spent and the ways of transferring.